Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. This is Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with you. And for today, this is part of my Pride Month experience video podcast. And I have a treat for you today with a lovely gentleman whose artwork I have admired for quite a while. But before I get into that, I need to get into the disclaimer and remind everyone that this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes. It does not constitute a session with a licensed mental health worker. I do recommend you seek out a mental health worker in your area to work on your unique issues. Now, that's out of the way. So today I have with us a gentleman whose artwork I happened to come across off of one of the networks. I may have been the early days of Facebook, or it might have been one of the predecessors. I don't remember. I'm just that old. But I'm just going to go and let them give us the bio here. I'd like to introduce you to Sean Z. Maker.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Sean Z. Maker. I've been creating since as long as I could hold a pencil in my hand, according to my uncles. And I do visual arts that focuses on storytelling through art and imagery. Lately, with an emphasis on the BIPOC experience, as well as expanding the LGBT experience as well in that narrative under the genres of fantasy, science fantasy, supernatural, and from all ages to mature themes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the comic I started of yours I was following, which was a web comic, I believe at that time, was also 18 plus.
Yes.
So just for those that are interested, that was focusing on a adult male gay relationship at the core of it, as well as everything that else that went around it.
Right. Yeah, it was. And I'll be expanding upon that in this latest incarnation. It'll be called Colors of Myth. Before it was under my old company imprint, Rated Z Studios. Now I operate under Z Maker Studios, and because I'm encompassing other projects as well. But that's definitely still one that's near and dear to my heart. I still have a large fan base for it, with the fan page that keeps growing, even though I haven't updated the work in at least a couple of years. People are still clamoring and asking for more. So I was like, okay, well, let me dust everything off and give this a bit of a facelift and focus on the things that I really want to focus on, because I would say the difference between the last incarnation and the current incarnation is the last incarnation I really focused on things that I thought other people would like. And in this one, I'm really focusing on things that are important to me that I want to get across in the storytelling. So especially where people of color are concerned, because we're often left out of those genre spaces. Or we're tokenized if we do appear.
Right, especially, it's very much, especially with the fantasy and sci-fi, especially when it comes to the comic books.
Right. Yeah, and I just wanted to be another voice that expounded on that.
So you said that you've been holding a pencil since as young as you could have. So tell us a bit more about how you got from starting to hold that pencil as a little kid to where you are now as a owner of your own business and studio and being a proud LGBT BIPOC man. My family thankfully encouraged my creativity. My mother, her immediate family, there was never a person that said I shouldn't do this or I can't do this. They always nurtured and put me in spaces and environments. I went to a performing arts school, junior high and high school. So my art got nurtured in that space. Moving on to college, I went to the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. Ironically enough, I didn't focus on illustration, which has always been my love, cartooning and illustration. I focused on graphic design because at the time I thought, well, I don't want to be a starving artist, because I always had this fear in the back of my head, especially as a Black man, like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be poor as an artist. Little did I know, I had to go through a series of lessons and
experiences. So once I graduated, I did graphic design for various advertising agencies, eventually starting my own company. So I did more freelance work prior to me leaving. But I wanted to move out to California to sort of see what that would be like for me. And I was terrified to do it, but it took me getting really sick in Chicago, overworking myself. So my mother had to come up and take care of me. I got bronchitis that almost turned into pneumonia. And she's like, son, you're not going to know if you don't try. And I was 24 going on 25. And after my 25th birthday, several months later, I moved out to Southern California. So, and then it's just been this ongoing journey and I've been here for 21 years. So it's been an ongoing journey of industry, different aspects of industry, doing all of that to finally getting back into my illustration, cartooning, and comics. And it's just been a graduation from there. So now I'm fully fledged, full-time, fear be damned. I'm going to do what I love. And here I am. Here I am.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So in a way, you've touched on one of those classic issues for those of us who have an interest in sci-fi, fantasy, the geeks, the blurs, and so forth. We often hear that is, quote unquote, not black, or that we're being Oreos, or even the idea of exploring art is something that often gets a negative view. It's always, and we don't want to say that everyone does that, but it's like it's a very consistency.
Yeah, it is.
That the idea that these things, these interests and so forth, are somehow less or not adding to the community.
Yes. And the narrative usually surrounding that is twofold. Artist, when I was actually looking into doing freelance work for some of the publishing companies, I'll use Image Studios being one because they're out here. The feedback that I would get from other people was, oh, you have a really great style, but you need to draw more like this white artist or this white artist or this artist. And it was never celebrating my own unique style like other artists have their own unique style. So that was an obstacle. And then the other was, speaking to what you just spoke about, especially when I was doing more industry related things. One of my projects that I'm thankful that I didn't sign the rights away for, one of the things that they had said to me, and this was before The Princess and the Frog came out, I was working with a well-known studio to try to get one of my projects greenlit. The creative team, the production team, they were all on board. It was the business people that came back to me and said two things. And the first one was, well, our studies find that urban markets, meaning Black, aren't typically into fantasy and science fiction. They want the more, the hard life. And I'm thinking, looking at myself, this is rub off. I'm into it, so I'm not the only one that's into it. So that was the first obstacle. And the second obstacle was because she was, clearly brown, they kept asking me if I could make her lighter. So she would be more appealing to other audiences. So it was always me needing to adjust how she appeared in the world to make her digestible to people that weren't of color.
Right.
Yeah.
Which kind of is just as we're recording this in March, the Batman movie just came out, and there was the recent talk about what happened for Zoe Kravitz, who wanted to play Catwoman in one of the Christopher Nolans, and their response to her was she was too urban.
Right. That's code. That's the language that they use.
Yeah, and that standpoint, that she couldn't walk around with the posh and elite, which is kind of how they had Anne Heche, and no fault to Anne Heche, she was actually very good in that.
Right.
But that standpoint of that code of that it's urban and what does urban represent does not include the idea that a fantasy, whether it is science fiction, fantasy in whatever aspect you want, and not just going high fantasy, or even any of the other genres that are connected under this, like spy, aren't ones that we would watch. It's all that we're going to be wanting to say watch Empire or Claws.
Right.
Yeah, there's definitely an audience for that, but not all of us.
Yes, and it isn't lost on me that the most celebrated stories where we show up in are usually an enslavement narrative. Historically, have always been an enslavement narrative that I'm just. It has its place, but I'm like that's not how our history began. Nor
Yes.
is it all that we're about or into. So.
Yes, we didn't just sort of spring out of our history starting there. There's a history long
Right.
before that.
Which is why I was glad to see Black Panther have the success that it did, because it really spoke to a lot of what I was up against when I was working directly in the industry. People telling me that an all-Black cast or a Black lead or those things won't sell. I heard that for years. Those things don't work until they did. So that's what sort of gave me the confidence to really, turn the magnifying glass on myself and really look at the landscape of, okay, what is it that I want to do? How do I want to do it? And what's important for me in my journey of doing these things. So I just wanted to be abundantly clear that, the BIPOC and the LGBT experience, that intersectionality, because that's what I grew up with. Everything that I create now is from a place of what I missed seeing growing up. And I just want to normalize it. That's it. There is room, there's enough pie for all of us. And, people of color, Black people, we're not a monolith, and there is a place for all of it too.
Yeah. So, and whether
hoping my work will give room.
Very much so. Whether it is dealing with Black, it's dealing with Latin, it's dealing with Asian, there is definitely an overlap of these things for us.
Right.
So in that regards, as you said a little earlier, that your first project, or the project that I started following on, was one that you were creating for others. How did that project come into existence?
I wound up getting connected with the Tom of Finland Foundation. And I can't remember how. I want to say it was a social gathering of some sort. And someone that I knew in the industry was connected to someone in the Tom of Finland house out here. I got invited to a social gathering. I found out they did an erotic art fair every year. And I attended that. And I saw all these artists, doing all of these things. I actually met Velasco at one of the events, which that was inspiring. And they were all like, well, you're an artist, you can do this. Why not? And I had an interest, and and I have to say that part of the catalyst was having lived in Chicago, where I feel like I got clarity and comfort in my gay identity. It was nice to there's an organization called ONYX that started out there. I don't know if you're familiar with it. But
I'm familiar with ONYX.
And so they made a point to start this organization to create a safe space for people of color who enjoyed, the leather community or wanted to explore it. And they made a point to make their presence known and be felt in INL and basically any event and I thought that was such a wonderful thing for someone who was a young gay coming out, and to have that space to see someone that looked like I did into something that I was basically told, you're brown, you're Black, you're not supposed to be into any of these things. Fast forward back to California, that popped into my mind when I said, oh, I want to do a story about this, but I also want to incorporate other things. I didn't want it to just be all erotica. I was like, I want a story. I can do both. Why not have both? Why not let it be entertaining and titillating? It can do all of those things. And I spent more time listening to what other people told me I should be doing instead of listening to myself fully about embrace. Because, don't do full color, do black and white. Don't do, and eventually I did do myth and color, which I was happy to do. And the story was starting to get more and more into what things that I wanted to explore and not about what other people were telling me would sell. Because that's that was the initial motivation was, well, this will sell. People will like this, have more of this, have more of this. And now, I feel like Colors of Myth is the ultimate evolution of everything that I've wanted to do, being older, wiser, and just not caring. I guess what other people may or may not think about it. Just the willingness for those things, because I didn't just want it to be about just gay. I literally wanted it to be the breadth of the spectrum of an experience, and that's why I redubbed it and added the colors of, because colors of being the spectrum of, you know, how we show up. I wanted that to be a part of that conversation in this fantasy set. So, yeah.
Very much so.
Hope that answered the question.
It does, and starts getting into why you started creating this particular piece of work, as well as just indicated too how essentially the business office was also influencing what you started with this, by saying that, oh, we need this, we need that, as opposed to what is about you, what do you want to see, which fundamentally any person who creates material and puts it out there isn't just purely for what is the good for the cash bottom line. It's about what we want to put out there. I would say the same thing with this podcast. I mean, it would have been very easy for me just to stick to either geek material or mental health material, but it's like, no, it also represents, it represents a part of who I am, where it's like, I'm a therapist. Yes, I'm also a geek, and I'm also a Black LGBT man. So it's like, I got a number of things here. They all work together and interconnect. So you got to create that aspect in a way for us, but ultimately more for ourselves.
Yeah. And I wanted it to be fun. I think that was the thing that I was getting away from, that I didn't realize. I was so fixated and focused on selling and this show and that show and how much am I making? Am I meeting my quota? That it started to take the fun out. Well, it took the fun out of it. And that's why I had to reevaluate. Why am I doing this? What is my intention? Where is the joy? And making sure that shows up. And I'm hoping, especially with the stuff that I'm coming up with now, you know, once people see that, again, it'll just be apparent in the work. And, you know, you create it, people will come. And I've always believed that. And now I have the platform and the space to do it. I'm just exploring it now.
So, and because we also don't want to say that you don't want to be concerned about paying the bills and so forth, because ultimately
got to do that.
We still got to pay that. That's still required in all of this, but trying to make sure that we are still being fulfilled is also much more important, because we burn out of this. And
it's a balance.
And that burnout is a big issue after these last several years that we're dealing with what people are dealing with. I'm then curious, how do you feel that your work has also either been influenced, or the events of the last several years have sort of affected you and what you're going to put into your work with this next round?
Honestly, I'm creating from a space of what's missing, what I don't see. And I spent a lot of my early years, early 20s, complaining about what I didn't see, without realizing I'm creative. I can create this stuff. And so I think with the pandemic happening, I think that just really sort of grounded me in focusing on what is the most important thing for me moving forward. You know, I don't know what my legacy is going to be, you know, when I'm not here anymore, but I do know while I'm still here, these are the things that I'm committed to creating here. Imagery that celebrates us beyond the boxes that often people try to put us in. Showing the breadth of the experience of our experiences, male, female, gender nonconforming, gender fluid. You know, however we show up in those spaces, I just want to celebrate all the aspects of that, because I think there's beauty in all of it. And with so much craziness going on in the world right now, it was just important for me to create a piece of something that would give anyone coming in who's a fan of these genres and spaces something that they can sort of relax and exhale with, because that's what it's doing for me. It's been really cathartic for me just to create. So I'm hoping other people will get to enjoy the stuff that I'll be putting out soon.
I want to touch back on something you said earlier, was the fact that your mom was so supporting to this aspect of you creating and such. And I would say my mother's also one of the ones who inspired my interest in sci-fi and fantasy as well. So that brings up an interesting dynamic, especially as gay men.
Right.
How do we sit with the aspect of that support came much more from our mothers and the women in our lives than from the men in our lives?
Say that last part again.
How that support came much more from the women in our lives as opposed to the men in our lives.
You know, I think in a lot of ways it's easier for women because there are no men, Black men specifically. We get bogged down in sort of what's expected of us from forces around us, whether they're intended or not. We're already bombarded with so many things anyway, and the older we get, the more we unlock the awareness and realization of what those things are and how they truly impact us. You know, I don't know how old you were, but one of the things that stands in my mind is the first time my mother told me how some people may view me because of the color of my skin. I was 5 years old. Because of the encounter at the grocery store. My mother is really fair, and depending upon the unobservant, she could be considered passive. Let look at my mother and go, "Oh, where do you tan?" And I as a kid, I'm going, "What? Where do you tan?" And so, getting that and those sort of social expectations of men as men, how we're supposed to show up in the world, I think that's unfortunately a part of it. I think it's gotten better. And I think it's getting better. But I think it's still going to take time. And and again, another reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing is I almost feel like Black people aren't allowed to be fully human. We're expected to show up in a box set of emotions, Black men, Black women. Anything outside of that realm of those emotional spaces, we're not supposed to show up as, or that's not possible. You can't be hurt. You're strong. Strong Black woman, strong Black man, you know. Yeah, but we can cry. We have moments of weakness, and we have other feelings, and our joy isn't limited to, you know, the barbecue or the picnic or the, you know, just really allowing us to show up as, you know, fully human. White people get to do it all the time. So why don't we else for that matter, any other group? Because that's also my big thing. It's like, I just want Black and brown people of color, to get to see the breadth of their experiences beyond a colonizing gaze.
Very, very true. And then we throw in also the aspects of what does it mean when dealing with the LGBT angle.
Right.
The classic idea being is you're either highly effeminate,
right,
or you're the DL trade,
right, which is silly.
Which is again two extremes,
right? And again, those things, you know, the DL thing can be a journey for some people, and the feminism. So what? Those are people getting locked into the, you know, the gender constructs. What a male, you know, girls like pink, boys like blue. That's just silly. And here's the irony for me. So one of my best friends growing up is incredibly effeminate, but he's straight. And when we grew up, people always go, you know, is your friend, you know, I would always, in the back of my head, I'm going, no, he's not, but I am. So it's just ridiculous how people, you know, how we can get caught up in those gender constructs and norms. And I just want to throw it all by the wayside and just look, we can color with all the colors in the crayon box. We're not limited to a certain number of colors because you're a male or a female. You don't have to put on airs. Like, we just need to exhale and breathe because we deal with enough already. So I just want to create some normalcy around you know, how we present and in how we present, how we show up, reminding people that that's okay. It's like, it's okay. it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it.
Absolutely loving.
Yeah. So yeah, so I try to come from a place of empathy and love, and hopefully entertainment too in my storytelling. And as people get to know these characters and the stories with all these projects I'm working on, I hope it'll be apparent. So
excellent. I think that's a perfect place for us to take a break there. So this is Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist on Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered, with the creator, Sean Z. Maker. And tune in and let's see what we have in the second half.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information. Do you have knots? Not the physical tightness in your neck and back, and not the ones on a rope, but metaphors for the helpful and unhelpful tugs in life that can help us ascend to a new level or stop us from falling too far back down. Join host Perry Clark for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered, a program about mental health and its practice from an Indigenous person of color. We'll help you find the knots that help you and avoid the ones that don't. Listen for new episodes every other week on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Hello all, welcome back to the second half. I'm here with Sean Z. Maker. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, and this is Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. So, Sean, as we were doing some prep for this, you had a major upset with technology.
Yes, I did.
In this year. So let's talk a little bit about that, because that also impacts the work you've done as well, and what that has shown to you.
Wow. So October 28th, of course, I remember the date of 2021. My computer, it's an old laptop, decided to, I was having memory issues. There was a memory leak, which caused a hiccup. And I lost about, more than 80% of my work that I had been working on, several of which I had planned on releasing on Halloween to the public. Because I had done, it's basically 6 to 8 months of artwork that I had done in story for both my Colors of Myth series, as well as my other all ages project, Ramona Rising. And I was devastated, to say the least. And it took a while for me to recover from that experience. And I was truly questioning whether or not I should even be doing this, because I was literally taking a risk, living on my savings to work on this art, because I thought, the timing's right. This is it. I'm ready. The rest will come once I start releasing the content. And that wasn't to be. So thankfully, I've recovered. I have a few more things in place to keep something that happened on that day from happening again, as well as eventually updating my equipment sometime in this quarter, of this year. And I'm redrawing everything. And as a matter of fact, the stuff I'm creating now is better than what I had prior to. So I've been having fun, and what I'm doing differently is instead of waiting to get things done, I will be releasing content as I'm getting it done, just to expose people to what I'm doing and to see if I can continue to grow the audiences for the work that I'm doing, just to see what happens with that.
So you spoke about another project, which is more all ages. What's that one like?
So Ramona Rising is the first of 9 books. It's literally, I've written the beginning, middle, and end, outlined the whole series, and it's loosely based off of a West African story, Ramona of the Flashing Sword. And I loved the concept of that, but what I did was I took the core of that and said, I want to make this deep fantasy, give them their own world, and let you learn about their world through Ramona's eyes, as well as her story and her journey moving forward. And it's literally a love letter to Black women, because I feel like there aren't enough heroes that are Black women in storytelling, and really giving them a kaleidoscope of characterizations and how they show up, including Ramona herself and her growth and her evolution through the story, as well as Black people. I wanted a narrative. I don't know if you know who Bell Hooks is. I'm a huge fan of hers. And I was so saddened when she passed. But one of the things there were 2 things that she said, and that I got from her, from reading her work and listening to her lectures, is what does a Black loving world look like? And so Ramona is sort of me exploring that in that story, in that setting. And also, we can never seem to escape that colonizer narrative. So what if we did, and how would that show up, and in what ways, especially visually, and especially with hair and hairstyles. I've done so much research on ancient African cultures, hairstyles of today that I don't see reflected in media. That I thought, oh my God, and I just had fun with it, and it's just been such a wonderful sort of journey and exploration. That's the one story that I truly cannot wait for people to see, because the stuff I've done with it, I've even showed my mother or a few other people I know, they have goosebumps. It's like, I've never seen anything like this. I go, yes, then that's what I want. So I'm really hoping it'll be received well, because that's the intention. Is I just want us to see us in ways we haven't before. So I'm really hoping that comes across through the Ramona Rising series.
Well, that's or at least another interesting question that crosses my mind. Most of that work has been on the web as opposed to looking at print media.
Right.
So just for people's understanding, what's the advantage to doing web-based as opposed to a print media source?
It's immediate. It's free. It doesn't cost me anything. However, what I do want to offer is, even though I am moving forward in the digital, everything's going to be going, I will be providing my work digitally, ebook form as well. I do make room for print as well, but I want to make that a sort of a crowd-funded effort. I don't want to take on that responsibility myself. What I really want to do is give people who are interested in seeing that be able to invest and partake in that, and let that be the catalyst for numbers and interest. Because again, we're often told from publishers or keepers, Black people don't like this, or people of color don't like, they only like X, Y, and Z of these boxes. And I figured if I did it that way, that the numbers and the interest from the people who got involved in purchasing would speak for itself. So then I don't have to argue anything and go, well, 20,000 people bought, the first Ramona Rising book. So what does that tell you? So just little things like that. I'm hoping to make room for. I want the actions to speak for themselves.
Well, definitely let me know when you're ready to do that. We'll definitely have a conversation
Okay.
about that as well. And I probably should also try and connect you with Demetrius Holt,
Okay.
aka Hellspawn Cosplay, who has got a couple of I've done a couple of recordings with here, as another one who can help you with, and maybe, who knows, coordinate things with that. I can't make no promises, but I'll try and connect you
No,
guys.
no. Hey, that the gesture is more than enough. So I appreciate it.
Perfect. So, stepping away from the work standpoint and so forth, something when we were talking also during the quick break, but I'm talking about your experience also growing up, when you were talking about the experience of stepping out and your connection with ONYX,
Right.
who,
Yes.
I'll be upfront, I'm hoping to try and get on there as a reporting from at least one of the branches,
That would be
one of the
great.
chapters as well here for reporting. But that experience is also something that we have plenty of coming out stories that
Yes.
come out, and usually, often, they are very much centered on white people.
Yes.
And I mean, I know Moonlight came out, which is one of those rare ones.
Rare ones,
And I know there's some other ones out there, but they all end up indie. But you sort of said some interesting things about that experience. And I was wondering, that also makes me wonder, is like, maybe there's a third project you can start out there around this. But tell me a little more, because there's something that was interesting said about that aspect of you coming out as a young man and your encounter with ONYX.
Yes. So coming out, coming out and getting comfortable with myself was a journey. And I do want to say this too. It was sort of in tandem with therapy. I went through therapy for almost 3.5 years. So I was almost 22 for several reasons, not just to get comfortable with my sexuality, but also to deal with my anger issues. Growing up, my mother, in her infinite wisdom, before home for college, it was before my 18th birthday. I was 17. I just graduated. My birthday falls in August in the summer. And literally 2 weeks after my birthday, I went to college. But she had said to me, she said, "Son, you have a lot of anger issues around the father figures that were supposed to be in your life. And right now, those are issues. Get older, that becomes baggage. And I don't want to see you allow that to impact you in a way that doesn't help you." And it shook me. And I'm glad she said it, because I hadn't considered it. And I was angry. But it was for a combination of reasons. It wasn't just that. It was, not being comfortable with my sexuality. Just all these things. I happened to, when I moved to Chicago, I wound up connecting with people. And as I was exploring my sexuality and my interests, I had a fascination with the leather community. But a lot of the visuals and images and signals I was getting early on it was all for white people. And when I saw someone that looked like me in those spaces, it felt tokenized and it also felt fetishized. And I didn't want to be either of those things. I didn't have that language back then. I just knew that it made me uncomfortable. And I had the pleasure of connecting with other, men of color, same gender loving men of color, who also had that interest, and exposed me to that organization or that group, that brotherhood, in a way that I had never seen or experienced and even thought was possible. And it wasn't in a lascivious manner. It was very much, they were all my big brothers, and they were very protective and nurturing and allowing me the room to explore and breathe and find out where I fit, if I fit, in any of that. But I had the freedom to explore safely. And that is something that has stayed with me all my life. And I'll always be thankful and grateful, because they showed up in something that I was given signals that I'm not supposed to like or want to be a part of or do. But because they showed up, and their presence and that brotherhood and that camaraderie showed me that it was okay for me to like what I like, and explore it, to see if I really liked it and how much of it did I like, and all of that. And so I'm that will definitely show up in my work in some capacity, especially with the Colors of Myth stuff. So yeah, that those are things that I'm eternally grateful for.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So I think that also adds to a lovely little segue to one of my standard questions I ask most of everybody who comes on here: myths and realities around mental health, and either seeking it, receiving it. I can speak to the practicing side of it, even just the image factor of it.
Right.
So the fact that even at that age, between 18 to 22, the idea that counseling was a positive thing for you, that's always a lovely thing to hear. But from your standpoint and just viewing the world and life, what would you say is another one of those myths that we have around mental health? That's
seeking outside help, like seeking therapy. There's a problem with you doing that. Like you're supposed to figure out those things yourself, or turn to God, and God will help answer all of those questions. And those things are okay, but this is another access. This is another pathway, and there's nothing wrong with you doing something that helps you help yourself. Because I still see resistance to that in colors of community, Black, Latino. I've seen, and I've also experienced it with friends. People that I've known that I've tried to encourage in that direction. Oh, I'll be okay. I'll figure it out. I'll work through it. How's that working out for you? So, and I just, I don't push the point. It's, their individual journeys, but I'm so thankful that, again, I had a family a mother that encouraged it, created a pathway to access for it. And it gave me freedom to, be where I am now, because I live a life that's fully self-expressed. Like I'm not uncomfortable with anything.
Oh yeah, I remember that picture you pasted on Facebook about I think it was a year ago. That sequence number.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm comfortable. Like I have no problem showing up how I choose to show up, and because I realize the people that have a problem with those things, those are their problems, not mine.
So let me ask this other question in regards to that. Was the therapist that you had worked with, were they also a person of color, or were they not?
She was, which was also a positive. She was Afro-Latina, and a Puerto Rican lady in Chicago. Forever grateful to her, because again, she allowed me the space. Her therapy style, everybody's got a different therapy style. She allowed me to move into spaces. She didn't push or nudge. She just made it clear that it was okay for me to express what I needed to express, how I needed to express it. So I really, really appreciate that, especially not knowing better.
Because I can also speak from the side of being able to provide it, is that, I've often hear, yes, from many clients that are a color, that's great to be able to work with a therapist of color. But, even doesn't matter what color the aspect is, if you do not match with the therapist,
right,
that doesn't help matters either.
Right. I was lucky.
Yeah.
I feel lucky.
Yeah, and I'll be frank, there are some other people of color that I have tried to work with, and we haven't meshed well.
Right.
It wasn't that it wasn't a bad that was Black person of color. It was we were not the right type of people to fit together, and it's okay for that to also happen.
Yes,
because
there's,
and I know from my side is I see a lot of this standpoint of even if there's that monolith again, that every therapist is the same and is capable of working with every single issue you bring us. No, there's some of us, that there are just some issues that we'll never touch.
Yeah.
And that's not bad. It just means we're not the right ones to work with this on that. I mean, I like to put it this way: you're not going to have your car fixed by the chef at your restaurant.
Right. Yeah.
And there are some therapists that are better at being chefs than they are being at mechanics.
I agree. Yeah.
And ultimately we're putting into you and helping you solve what is already in you too.
Right.
So whether it's done through food, whether it's done through mechanics, whether it's done through art, whether it's done through writing, whether it's just sitting here and telling each other stories, each therapist is going to work a different way to get that. Not every therapist is the right one to work with. That's not a bad thing.
Exactly. Find the one that fits you. And it's okay to walk away. So I'll tell you a brief story. So I just a year ago, I decided to revisit therapy just as a check-in. Just as a check-in. I like to do that. I'm an overthinker. So the first person that I was matched with, we weren't a good fit. And neither was the second, but the third time was a charm, worked out perfectly. And I was like, okay, this is the person that I gel with. And I knew right away, like within 20 to 30 minutes of the session, I would know, and I would be polite, but I would let them know, like, I don't really think that, our connection is what I need right now, but I do appreciate your time. So I moved on until I found someone that actually worked better with me.
Very good. Yeah, good. Yeah, because then there's no shame in that. I think one of the things that comes up is the difficulty around vulnerability.
Yes.
And this aspect is, yes, you're going to be, to a certain extent, you're going to be vulnerable with your therapist. Doesn't mean you have to be vulnerable right in that first session. That's what you are feeling out to see if, like, okay, can I be vulnerable? If not, okay. And I know that takes a lot of energy, and especially for many men, that takes a lot of energy.
Yes. Yeah.
But that does not mean the process isn't going to work.
Right.
It just doesn't work with that person.
Yeah, being patient, being observant and mindful of, and honest about what your needs actually are. I think that's the other thing too, is I think there's a myth that the therapist is going to fix you. And it's like, no, that's not it. Because the fix is in what you're willing to show up as and be honest about, whatever it is you're having trouble with or feel like you need to have an experience.
Yeah, I don't like to use the word fix. I usually prefer the word, I'm here to help you manage it. Understand what it is so you can manage it.
Yes. Yeah, I like that too.
So I think this has been a lovely conversation. I thank you very much for being willing to come on here, share this stuff with us. I've been a long time admirer of your work. So where can people find you if they want to see more of the work that you do?
There's several places. I would point to Instagram. Z-Maker Studios is the company site. Sean Z-Maker is my I do my photos and some of my art there. The website, zmakerstudios.online is coming. If page now, it says it's under, it's being updated. I'm currently updating it, so it'll be up this week. And I'll start
by the time this airs, it should be out.
It'll be up. Yeah, you can be able to see what I've been working on and what I'm moving into by then. So
alrighty. So we'll have that information in the show notes as well. Okay. So there's that. But thank you again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. So this has been Sean Z. Maker. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist. This is Untying Knots, Minds and Souls, Untethered on the Voice America Network. So tune in for our next one, which hopefully I'll be able to get, we'll be able to get a little kinky with that one. Till later, folks. Have a good Pride.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.